Loud. Okay, recording is in progress. So this week I'm going to start out with a story. I actually have kind of a tradition of always telling this story in any possible context that I can get away with it. So I'm going to tell the story, and you just have to put up with it. And I can almost always make a connection to what it is that I really wanted to talk about, and so I will do that. So the story is a well-known story from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. So probably some of you know it already, and if you do know it already, you can give me that knowing look, but don't, no spoilers. And it's called The Turkey Prince. And it begins once upon a time, like all good stories begin. There was a king, and the king had a son. And one day, this son decided he was a turkey. So what did he do? He took off all of his clothes and he got under the table and he starts pecking crumbs under the table and gobble, 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 gobble. So the king very appropriately gets freaked out, right? This is pretty freaky, having your son, under the table going gobble, gobble, gobble and pecking crumbs. So he calls all of his ministers, and says, what are we going to do about it? So the ministers try their very best. They come and they bring, and they try talking to the kid, and they say, come on, come out from under the table. He won't come out. And they try bringing, they try everything they possibly can, and they have no idea what to do. They're completely. So finally the king says, okay, we need to find a professional. So he puts up signs all over the kingdom saying that he's going to offer a reward to anybody who can get the prince out from under the table. And people start to come, and they come with all sorts of equipment. The people come and, pointed sticks, and they poke this poor kid, and he just goes gobble, 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 and keeps pecking crumbs off the floor. And they try to bring girl turkeys, they bring a girl turkey and go, here's a girl turkey, come on, come on. And he's like, no, he's gobble, 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 pecking crumbs off the floor. They try everything. Finally, this very holy looking guy shows up, right? He's got a big, long beard, flowing robes. And they think, and he says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And they think, okay, this is going to be amazing, right? This guy, he's going to do some like super religious magic, who knows what, right? It's going to be great. So what does this guy do? He takes off his clothes, right? And he gets under the table and he starts going gobble, gobble, gobble and pecking crumbs off the floor. And now the ministers are out of their mind, right? Because now they've got two people under the table going gobble, 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 pecking crumbs off the floor. So the tzaddik, the holy guy, is under the table, and the turkey prince looks at him and goes, "Excuse me, who are you?" He said, "I'm a turkey." He said, "You're a turkey?" "Yeah." He said, "Gobble, gobble, gobble. Nice to meet you." They start pecking crumbs off the floor with him. So a couple days later, the tzaddik turns to one of the guards who's standing in the room and says, "Excuse me, do me a favor, bring me 2 pair of pants." So he gives him the pants and he puts on a pair of pants. And the turkey prince looks at him and says, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm putting on a pair of pants." He says, "Turkeys don't wear pants." He said, "Who's to say a turkey can't wear pants if a turkey wants to wear pants?" And he said, "Yeah, who's to say a turkey can't wear pants if a turkey wants to wear pants? Give me a pair of those pants." So they put on a pair of pants. And there they are in their pants, gobble, 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 pecking crumbs off the floor. A few days later, calls up to one of the guards, "Bring me 2 shirts." They bring him 2 shirts. He puts on the shirt. Turkey prince looks at him and goes, "What are you doing?" So "I'm putting on a shirt." He says, "Turkeys don't wear shirts." He says, "Who's to say a turkey can't wear a shirt if a turkey wants to?" "Yeah, who's to say a turkey can't wear a shirt? Give me one of those shirts." And he puts on the shirt. So now there they are. They're both on the table, pecking crumbs off the floor. So a few days later, the tzaddik turns to one of the guards and says, "Bring me 2 plates." So he takes the plate and he starts taking the crumbs and putting them on the plate underneath the table. Turkey Prince looks at him and says, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" He says, "I'm eating off a plate." Turkeys don't eat off of plates. Who's to say a turkey can't eat off a plate? If a turkey wants to eat off a plate, yeah. Who's to say a turkey can't eat off a plate? Give me one of those plates, right? And now I'm eating on plates. Now, finally, a day later, he takes the plate and he puts it on the table, and the tzaddik sits down at the table and he starts to eat with a knife and fork. And the Turkey Prince is still under the table and he grabs his pant leg. Yes? What are you doing? I'm sitting at the table. Turkeys don't sit at tables. He says, "Who's to say a turkey can't sit up?" Yeah, who's to say? And he takes his plate and he puts it on the table and he sits down and he takes out a knife and fork and he starts to eat. In the middle of eating, he looks over at the tzaddik and says, "Wait a second. He said, I know something's not right here, okay? I know turkeys don't sit at tables and eat." And he says, turns to them and he says, "They do when they're also princes. A turkey can also be a prince." And that moment, the Turkey Prince remembered who he was. Now, the story. So I'll unpack the story a little bit. So first of all, I once had a job interview as a teacher, and they asked me my philosophy of teaching, and I told that story. I got the job, by the way, because really it is a story about teaching, right? And it's a story about change. Remember last week, right? 2 weeks ago with the arms, right? Change is not easy, and the idea that we can just force change, we can just push, that all we have to do is poke someone with a stick, or we have or hang a carrot in front of their face, that's going to be what changes them is really not very well thought out. In fact, in order to change not just another person, but also change ourselves, we have to get under the table, sometimes with ourselves. And let's face it, we're all turkeys, okay? All of us are turkeys, okay? Especially Shelley. But, all of us are turkeys, right? All of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, we know that we're turkeys. All of us know that we are, that even if we're princes and we live like princes, and we act like princes, there's a part of us that knows that we're a turkey. And there's a part of us that's be perfectly happy picking crumbs off the floor. And there's another part of us that says, no, we're actually better than that. And that can be awakened, but that awakening is going to come slowly. If you notice the behavior, right? If you notice the behavior of the teacher in the story, what does he do? He gets down into the level of the person. He understands that person. And the same way also with ourselves, we also have to understand ourselves. We have to be honest, and we have to know where we are. And if we're under the table, we're under the table, right? If that's where we are, if we're in the pits, we're in the pits. And we have to meet ourselves there, and we have to draw ourselves out inch by inch, step by step, and with others too. Of course, we always want other people to change. Okay, that's part of life, right? We have spouses, we have children, we have friends, we have people in the community, we have all sorts of people we want to change, and that's not going to be possible if we're pushing and shoving and hanging carrots in front of them. But if we get under the table with them, and if we take it inch by inch, step by step, in small steps, then we have the possibility. We have the possibility of change. So I love that story. There's a lot more in that story. It's very funny. I told that story to a group in Chennai, in Chennai, India. They have like every couple of months, they have like a storytellers thing, and I'm part of their like storytellers things. I have a connection to that city, and I told that story maybe like 2 years ago, I want to say, during the pandemic. And very recently, somebody sent me a clip of some kind of a businessman's convention in South India, and somebody was telling that story. Apparently, the story has made the rounds in South India since I told it 2 years ago. It's now kind of made it was great. So this idea of taking things little by little is really, really important. There's a wonderful Musar writer, a writer about ethical development, named Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, and he tells also a great story that he would often tell his students, take it small, take it small, take it small, take it small, and he just couldn't express like why. He couldn't express why until he was an Air Force chaplain, maybe an Army chaplain, and they asked him to go visit troops out in the Sinai somewhere. So they put him, they put this elderly rabbi into a fighter jet, right? And they're flying him out into the Sinai, and they're flying very, very, very low, right? I mean, really low. And he asked them, he said, like, he was terrified. He's like, why are we flying so low? And he says, we're flying so low so that the radar doesn't catch us, right? We're flying below the radar. And so he said, that's actually that's why we start small. We start small because there is a resistance, right? There's this idea that whenever we do something on the side of holiness, there's a resistance on the other side. There's a resistance on the side of the Sitra Achra, the other side. And so in order to forestall that so that we don't get whomped. Remember last week I talked about, Yom Kippur, right? The people who come, right? The people who come for Ne'ilah, right? And they never come back for the rest of the year. They get whomped, right? They get a big smack, right? So we don't necessarily start big, we start small. We fly under the radar so that what it is that we change and what we do is going to be small, incremental, step by step, until finally, our turkey selves are sitting at the table and we're being princes and princesses. They're feeling princesses. They're princesses already. This idea of a kind of small spiritual project, I think, is a very powerful one. In the Chabad movement, they call it a hachlata. That is, and most people, especially for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they try to, and sometimes for other times of the year, sometimes for Sfirat Omer, people try to take on some small spiritual project. That small spiritual project should be the next logical step for you. I can't possibly tell you what it is. I can't tell you what it is because I don't know. It's the next logical step for you. It can be in relation to Shabbat, it could be kashrut, it could be 1 year. Mine actually 1 year was to give loans to people. I had a little bit of extra money that year, and I created like a little my miniature free loan society, doing acts of chesed, maybe calling somebody once a week, visiting the sick once a week, keeping better track of people who are ill, or people who are in mourning, or people who are lonely, inviting people to your home, maybe people who are lonely, who need company. There are many things that you can do, but think of it as the next logical step for you. And this is a very, very, very powerful, a very, very powerful dynamic. We have in Pirkei Avot, it says mitzvah goreret mitzvah. Mitzvah brings a mitzvah. And one way of understanding that is it creates a kind of force. Once we do something, right? Once we make a movement, that movement now becomes a force that now brings more in its wake. I'm not a physicist, as you can tell. I'm sure there's a way of describing this in physics that actually makes sense, but I know what I'm talking about. Harry's looking at me like, this guy knows nothing about science, nothing at all. But in any case, it's a very powerful principle, and it's, I asked, there's a Chabad rabbi in Los Angeles named Schwartzy, who was he was a very happy guy. And I could never understand why he was so happy. And I asked him one day, I said, why are you so happy? He says, because I'm out there like saving souls, or he said something like that. And he had like these huge events, and he had these, he would make these services for 1,200 people in a theater in Hollywood and all this stuff. And I said to him, I said, you're saving souls. I saw the people who you work with. They're not going anywhere. They're just kind of going, they're Hollywood types and whatever. And they don't look so impressed with me. At that time, I was more of a religious fanatic. My nickname at the time was the Ayatollah. I was pretty insufferable. And so he said to me, he says, I get everybody to do one more mitzvah. He says, anybody who I meet, anybody who I encounter, I can guarantee they do one more mitzvah. And I believe with all my heart that mitzvah gereret mitzvah, that one mitzvah brings another mitzvah, that's in the power of that. And so these very small steps, right, can be very, very powerful. Anything, even if it's, I had a student once who wanted to keep more Shabbat, and I told them, turn off your car radio. Turn off your car radio. Even if you turn off if you do nothing else in Shabbat but turn off your telephone, that is an amazing accomplishment. That will change your Shabbat completely. So even small steps are really very, very meaningful. So that's my second point. Third point I wanted to make, and I think is Sheldon here? Sheldon is here. Sheldon asked a great question last week, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit further because I think it's really important. The Rambam, when he talks about repentance, when he talks about tshuva, he says basically there are three steps basically. So the first step is to have a regret, charata, right? Charata, to have a regret. That is to have an awareness that you were falling short, that you've sinned. I hesitate to use the word sin, and not because I'm so politically correct, but because we have a great vocabulary for we have 4 or 5 words, all of which we translate as sin, and each one has its own little flavor, right? We have chet, which means something where we miss the mark, which is not necessarily something that we intend. We have an avera, which is where we've transgressed a limit, right? Where we knew the limit is there and we chose to transgress it. We have pesha, which is this idea of where we may not have transgressed on purpose, but we did create the conditions for that to happen on purpose. We were negligent in some sense. So we have many different words. So I'm going to lump all those things together, for the purpose of this discussion. But those are all very different things, and we have to manage them differently. Just like I saw one of you was in your kitchen. Was in the kitchen, right? In the kitchen, we do different things with different stuff, right? I mean, you don't cook garbanzo beans in the same way that you cook fava beans. You don't cook fava beans the same way you cook navy beans. Things are different. You have to deal with them in different ways. But in general, right, we begin with regret, and then we move to confession, and from confession to actually making a change in our behavior. And I think that the weak link in all of this is confession, and that's what Sheldon asked about last week. The weak link is confession because it's the least natural of all those three things. That we regret stuff, that's natural, right? Everybody regrets things, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath. You regret. I'm not sure exactly the difference between sociopath and psychopath, but I feel like neither one of them regrets a lot. You're likely not to regret a lot. But normal people, we regret things all the time. It's natural. And changing our behavior, we also do all the time, right? It's part of life. That, we take one direction, we see that direction doesn't work, we turn on a dime, we do something differently. That's normal. Confession is not something that we do a lot of. Okay, we don't do a lot of confession. We do a fair amount of apology. And I have to kind of think, I haven't thought out exactly what the difference between an apology and a confession is. To think that out, I will say that for those of us who apologize a lot, I'm one of them because I make a lot of mistakes. For those of us who apologize a lot, apology is not easy. Okay, it's not easy at all. It's very easy to mess up. Every man has messed up and said, I'm sorry for whatever I may have done to hurt you, right? I'm sorry if I said something, right? There are lots of ways to screw up an apology. One of them is by not being specific enough. That's certainly one, or overly kind of focusing on one's own intentions rather than the other person's feelings. I mean, there are many ways to screw up an apology. That's for another day. But confession is not at all something which comes naturally to us, and nor is it something that we necessarily have thought about, like, why are we doing that? And why does he think this is such an important part of the tshuva process? And it's so important that it's in the middle. And I think that's very important to remember. I think there's a real reason why it's in the middle. So I wanted to share that first. Why is it in the middle? Why is it harata, right? Regret is basically a mental and emotional state, right? Action, of course, is something that we do. So in a kind of Kabbalistic worldview, okay, the transition between thought and action is speech. So think about the way that the world is created, right? God imagines the world, so to speak, okay? God imagines the world, and then he speaks it into existence, and it's now a working, moving, solid reality. So we go from the idea to the reality. And we see this, of course, all the time with ourselves. I mean, a very simple thing is if you think you're going to do something, okay, let's say, I think to myself, I'm going to change that light bulb in the kitchen, right? The light bulb in the kitchen, which has been sitting there for I don't know how many months unchanged, right? I'm gonna change that light bulb. So if I think to myself, I think to myself, I'll change the light bulb. The chances of my changing that light bulb, if I just think I'm going to change the light bulb, are almost nil, right? If, on the other hand, I say even to myself, I am going to change that light bulb, right? That much increases the chances that I'm going to change that light bulb, because it has now brought that thought into a kind of reality. It's not a physical reality yet, but it is a kind of creative reality to speak something out. So the Rambam is very, very clear that what he's recommending is vidui divarim. He's saying is a confession in words, right? It's a confession in words, and those words should be spoken out. Now, we have texts. I think this is what Sheldon was alluding to last week, And that is, of course, we have, especially on Yom Kippur, and even before Yom Kippur in Slichot, and even before Slichot on Mondays, and on Mondays, and it was really every day, really every day, as part of the Tachanun, as part of the supplication that comes after the Amidah prayer. We also have a composition, which is a kind of vidui dvarim. It's a confession. It's a confession formula, and there are a number of different formulations. That were composed over time in order to allow you to fulfill your obligation to confess in words. The problem is, and Sheldon alluded to that last week, is that it's not so simple. First of all, using someone else's words to express deep felt feelings. I mean, when we apologize, imagine apologizing according to a script. Okay, so imagine, I made the comparison of apology to confession. So imagine that you are now, right, that you're sitting with your spouse, or you're sitting with your child, or you're sitting with your friend, right, and you did something wrong, right, and you pull out the script, right, and you say, I am really sorry that, and while you're at it, make the script in what's not your first language, probably. Okay, and even if it's your first language, it's an ancient form of your first language. So we could do it in Middle English if your English is your first language, or if French is your first language, we do it in Middle French, right? Or if Arabic is your first language, we could do it in Classical Arabic, right? And you're going to be lost. You're not. Whatever feeling was there is going to be leached out by the fact that you were using someone else's words. So that is a very big challenge. Okay,
Rabbi, this is Sheldon.
Hi, Sheldon.
You've encapsulated my concern, and I dread the alchates and the regrets and for all the reasons you just mentioned.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. So you should know that makes absolutely perfect sense. It is very, very, very challenging to pour yourself into the words. So the challenge is, and I think this is, by the way, the challenge with the tefillah script in general. Okay, not just with the alchet, which I think is particularly challenging, but with the tefillah script idea in general, is how do I actually show up and be the one who's doing vidui dvarim? How am I the one actually using my voice to confess when I'm using somebody else's words? So my first, and beyond that, I'll add that, when there's all this other theatrics going on, right? We're supposed to have koved rosh, that we're supposed to, bow our heads a little bit. We're hitting our chest. By the way, this is not supposed to be, we're not Shiites. We're not pounding our chests, right? We're knocking at our hearts, right? Waking up our heart a little bit, just knocking at it. Hello, just making sure it's still there, right? Knocking at it. And we do it, by the way, on the word lifanecha, before you, right? To have in mind that the problem is not just that we did something wrong, but that we did something wrong in God's presence, right? That God was there, right? He's there. No matter what we do, that He was there. With all the theatrics, that's also difficult, right? Is my head bent? Am I hitting properly? Did I hit the right time? Right? That becomes, we're involved in the kind of a hokey pokey, and that's not so simple, right? That's not so easy. So my strong suggestion, as I said to Sheldon last week, is that we learn to take time to go off script. Now, I gave the example in synagogue some months ago that I used to use with my students. My students were learning Shakespeare's sonnets, So I challenged my students. I said, listen, do me a favor. I want you to go to the mall, and I want you to pick some random person of the opposite sex, and I want you to read them one of Shakespeare's sonnets. Okay? And tell me how it goes. So, okay. So, every once in a while, every year, like one kid would be brave enough to do it. So, he picks, usually it's a boy, usually it's an obnoxious boy. So this obnoxious boy picks some girl in the mall, right? And walks up to her and reads one of these love poems. And she just thinks he's a loon, she thinks he's nuts. And he's like totally uncomfortable, right? Because he thinks he's so cool, but this can't be cool reading a Shakespeare sonnet. It doesn't work. So he's feeling totally uncool. She's feeling like he's a creep, right? And it's all totally weird. So came back to me and said, okay, so how was it? He said, oh, it was really bad. I said, it's really bad. Okay. So take the same poem, and I want you to read it to a girl you really like somebody who you really like her, okay? Whether she knows it, she doesn't know it doesn't matter. Somebody you really like. And tell me how that goes. So he goes and he said, oh, it was great, He says, I read it, and she was like smiling, and there were flowers, in the air, and why? Because if you have a relationship, then it's possible to pour yourself into the words. But if you have no relationship, if you've never talked before, just talked, right? Then all of a sudden, all that formality and all that poetry and all that, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. So it's important. You have 2 weeks, you have a couple of weeks to actually spend some time just talking to God, right? To do real vidui dvarim, right? To really be honest with yourself. And by the way, I say, that there's the truth, and then there's the truer truth. I find that my experience is when talking to God, and not just talking to God, talking to people, talking to my friends, talking to my wife, talking to everybody, that we often start out with what we think is the truth, and it takes a while to get to the real truth. I think I have layers and layers and layers and layers of rationalizations and self-deceptions that I have to get through. But just to spend some time just talking to God. Rabbi Nachman calls it, he says, a person should judge themselves every day. So he offers basically a very simple kind of meditation to do in talking to God. He calls it hidbodedut, or seclusion. He says, spend some time every day talking to God. He recommends an hour a day. It's very difficult for people to do. 10, 15 minutes is about as much as most people can do in the beginning. And he says, start out with gratitude. Start out simply by thanking God for the things that you have, and really the things you have, right? If you have health, thank God for it. If you don't have health, but you have good doctors, thank God for that. If you have bad health, but you got a lot of patience, thank God for that. Right? Whatever it is that you have, thank God in a sincere way. And then he says to judge yourself. And this is really vidui dvarim, right? In the off the script, without the achetz, without bending your head, without figuring out when your hand hits your heart. And that is just to talk to Hashem about about the places in which you fall short, and the aspirations that you have, maybe that you haven't lived up to, the things that you want and you yearn for, but you just haven't been able to get there yet. And then sentence yourself to a second chance every single time. Right? I sentence myself to a second chance. Right? Okay. I'm not. He says, and he said, Rabbi Nachman says, by the way, that if you do this, you undercut the system of judgment, right? There's a concept of dinim, concept of judgment, right? So if we judge ourselves, right, we're showing up in court when we're showing up in court, you're showing up on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you're standing in the court, you're wearing your orange jumpsuit. I feel like I should wear an orange jumpsuit to shul. Wouldn't that be great? For Rosh Hashanah, I'm here, I'm in the court, right? Here I am in my orange jumpsuit, and he says, okay, trial's going to start. So sorry, double jeopardy. I already tried myself. Sorry, I've been convicted too. I was convicted to a second chance. Sorry. So he says that's the second. And then lastly, he said a person should spend time looking for their good points, right? Not just looking for your bad points, but looking for your good points, right? What is it that I've done? What is it that I am that's really praiseworthy and wonderful? Where is it that in the things that I've done that there's good and holy motives? Where am I a really great person? Because it takes a really great person to stand, to stand bravely in that orange jumpsuit. You can't just, we're going to be standing in that courtroom, and we have to have something to say for ourselves. So we also have to have a sense of ourselves, and also because we want to go back into the world after a little 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour of seclusion. We want to go back into the world with a sense of joy, right? We don't be slogging in the world. Oh, I just beat myself up, and you don't bring that back into the world. The world doesn't need you like that, okay? Your family doesn't need you like that. Your neighbors don't need you like that. The people on the street don't need you like that, because you're going to have that sour face, right? They need a good, happy, healthy you. So you want to come back with joy, right? And having looked at yourself and said, well, yes, I'm not perfect. I did this. And so what that does potentially, especially when it comes to the vidoy, is that when you start to do the vidoy, right, you're able to put yourself into it, right? And definitely, look at the text beforehand, see the things that actually move you, and don't feel a need to always be with the crowd. This is a strange sport, tefillah, right? It's simultaneously individual and collective. It's a team sport, but it's also an individual sport. And it's important to actually linger where you want to linger. If you come across an al-chet, you come across something in the vidoy that you really relate to, right? It's something that's really a problem for you. Spend time on it, right? Spend time on it. Stop. And if you have to skip something else, right? These things are created to help you to actually do something. They are not the thing themselves, right? They're there to help you to do it, right? And so don't allow them to become an obstacle. Allow them to become tools to be able to kind of push you forward, and not something which is holding you back. So that's my advice for the week, is to spend a little bit of time. You got 2 weeks, right? So 2 weeks, 20 minutes a day, 50 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, thanking God, right? Thanking God. And this is completely uncomfortable, by the way. We're not used to talking to God. It's weird as hell. It's good, you're going to sit there and think I'm a complete lunatic, and you can send me an email and say you are a nut, like this was nutty advice, but try it, okay? Just sit where nobody can hear you, because you'll look like a loon. Unless you want to look like a loon. Nowadays, everybody looks like a loon. They walk around with the things in their ears and they talk to themselves all the time. So you can talk to God if you want to. Nobody will care. You just walk around, no problem. Nobody will care. So in the old days, I used to do this every day. So I'd get stuck in an airport. So they used to have phone booths in the old days. So I would go in the phone booth, right? And I would pick up the phone. I would talk to God for 20 minutes on the phone, and That's what I used to do. So they don't have phone booths anymore. I don't think so. Looking into it. But now it's no problem. You just put the thing in your ear and rant. It's no problem. So thanking, judge yourself, find your good points, be happy. And that's it. And we're at exactly 7:45, exactly as many minutes as any human being can pay attention. So questions, thoughts? You have to unmute yourself though, because otherwise you can't. Sheldon, do you feel better?
Yes, I really, I appreciate, I'm taking notes like crazy here. And I'm coming up against, we all have I would say all, most of us have fixed impressions of who we are and what we are. And these impressions could be way off base.
True.
And in order to take advantage of the special time of the year and the opportunity to build our personalities and be more, I don't want to use the word humble, but more aware of who we are, what we are, and where our shortcomings are, and how we can do better in our relationships and with ourselves and the whole thing. It requires serious concentration and the ability to change those tracks in our head that keep coming out with the same garbage all the time, and say, wait a minute, maybe I could change how I think and have a little happier life, instead of being stuck in the rut that I go around with the other 300 days of the year. And it's not complicated, but it takes you have to want to do it, and you got to spend the time to do it. But the reward is fantastic if you can get it done.
Well, you just spent 45 extra minutes. So that's really, I think that this is, like that committing to do something like this and kind of preparing makes a huge difference. For me also makes a huge difference.
I don't spend very much time on these conferences, but when I saw that you were doing it, I said, well, wait, it's going to be good stuff.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Unique. Your ideas are unique, and there are a lot of great rabbis out there, great people, but there are very few who really, really know how to connect, in a unique way. You're that type of person.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so sweet. Well, thank you. Okay, now I feel good. I don't know. Good. Thank you so much. That's so sweet. Okay, other thoughts?
Sheldon. I agree exactly with what Sheldon said.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Listening to you, love to listen to your lectures, and before the holidays, it makes it much more interesting to
I'm so glad. I'm really glad.
Thank you.
Okay. Erin?
I was just thinking, both Benson and I are from big families, and as a big sister, a lot of times you have the younger siblings fighting, and then you said, you apologize to her and you apologize to him, and sort of like you force them to apologize, but the little kid doesn't really feel like saying they're sorry. So when you talked about Maimonides and that the confession should be something important to you, that's what I was thinking of. A lot of times we say we're sorry, but maybe we're not really sorry, but in a confession, you're sort of like digging into yourself and saying, what am I really, really sad about? Or, what do I really feel bad about? Do you know what I mean? Instead of someone, as
adults,
so,
we're called upon to be really honest with ourselves. And I like what I like what the Soul Center, Naomi, right? Is that your name? Yeah. Wrote about in the chat that this sounds a lot like therapy, talking about our self-deceptions, kind of pushing through, talking about being honest and all that sounds like therapy with Hashem. And I think that it is like that. I think that, a friend of mine who wrote a book about this, Hitbodedut, he made a very nice observation. He says it's kind of like, imagine there are lots of different rooms. And sometimes your Hitbodedut is like being in a therapist's office, right? Sometimes it's like being in the bedroom. Sometimes it's like being in the office. sometimes it's like we have, different ways of relating to Hashem. And one of them is really to see Hashem as our therapist who has insights into us and who can share insights into us. And you will find, I don't want to get too mystical, but you will find an inner voice, not like the Christians say, God talked to me and told me to buy an airplane, but never understood that. As a kid, I hated that. I couldn't understand. I watched those preachers on TV, and God was always talking to them and telling them to buy airplanes. And God never talked to me, and He never told me to buy an airplane. But you do have an inner voice. You do have an inner wisdom. You have, Rabbi Nachman says you have a kind of inner tzaddik. You have an inner Moshe Rabbeinu. You have this inner insight into things, even into your own self-deceptions. You can see past them, and sometimes it's difficult to see them. And sometimes you only see it for a second. Also, it's kind of like you get flashes, and it's like you lose it, but still it's there. And that's also a very powerful tool that can help you to be able to see yourself more clearly. We all have distorted mirrors that we carry around in which we see ourselves, we got from, and this again sounds like therapy, right? We get those distorted mirrors from our childhoods, from our experiences, from just our ideas and perceptions of the world. And part of what this is about is finding new and better mirrors, a new way to kind of look at ourselves.
Rabbi, it is like therapy, except it's better than therapy because you don't have a deductible.
Exactly.
It's all yours, baby.
Exactly, all for free.
It doesn't cost you any more to think clearly.
That's right.
Be, a little bit self-judgment and try to do a little bit better.
That's right. And there's no 50-minute hour. An hour is an hour. So, okay. Well, thank you guys so much. If anybody wants to have questions, whatever, you can always find me, and happy to hear from you. And you can track me down in synagogue, or you can give me a call, or you can hit me up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or wherever else.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just
Bye-bye.
would like to say hello to Jacob. I haven't seen you for a long time, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much.
When are we going to see you, Bezat Hashem? When?
God willing, I've been going through some difficulties, but I'm getting better.
Okay, then. Wish you a
God
wonderful
willing,
time.
I'll be coming back again.
Good, wonderful. Looking forward to see you.
Thinking of me. Thank you
Good to
very
see
much.
you all.
Bye-bye, folks.
Thank you.
Shelley also. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.